Friends of Dentro La Storia, welcome back to our outdoor videos. We started last year in 2025 and we're kicking off the first video of 2026 from a special city. A city that until recently was known as the Berlin of Italy, not in the sense of being a capital, but in the sense of being a divided city. Here next to me is the border marker, which until not long ago marked the distance between two worlds. Ours, the Italian one, and the one close to us, yet so distant from the socialist era. The Cold War, the barbed wire, there it is. A long barbed wire fence that divided Europe, as Winston Churchill said, from the north all the way to Trieste. We're not in Trieste here, but in Gorizia, and the barbed wire used to be exactly here, where you see my feet. It was a barbed wire fence with a concrete base with a metal mesh, a very tall railing, and it cut this city, Gorizia, in several places. We chose this spot to start the video, the symbolic spot, Transalpina Square, with the beautiful Gorizia station behind me, the station of the Transalpina line, not Gorizia Sud, which is still in service with the Italian railway network. Gorizia is a beautiful story, but also a painful one that needs to be known, so today discover it with us. It's the 1500 when the county of Gorizia comes to an end. The last count dies without leaving any male heirs, and all the territory of the counts of Gorizia passes to the Habsburgs. It will be a very long period of rule, over 4 centuries, until 1918. Actually, the first Italian troops to enter Gorizia on June 10, 1916, are the Yellows of the Casal Brigade. They are the ones who enter that city, which is described in a popular song, popular among the soldiers, but banned under threat of execution by firing squad. Cursed. Oh, Gorizia, you are cursed. It's a song that became very popular during the Great War. Among all the infantrymen, the artillerymen, the Alpini, who are fighting here on the Eastern Front, and who see Gorizia as a goal, but also as a city that for many is unreachable. Just think that over 51,000 Italians lost their lives in the fighting to capture Gorizia. And that's just the figure for the Royal Italian Army. Think about the other side, about the Imperial Royal Austrian Army. Gorizia is a contested city. When the Italian infantry enter Gorizia, the Transalpina station behind me, which had only been active for 8 years, is reduced to rubble, like most of the city. The fighting, the bombings are terrible. Gorizia remains in Italian hands for just over a year. In the autumn of 1917, the defeat at Caporetto, the disaster, forces the Italians to withdraw, to retreat back toward the Piave. The Italian troops will return to Gorizia when the war is essentially over. On November 7, 1918, the difficult reconstruction begins. But it's not just a reconstruction from an architectural point of view. It's a social reconstruction that becomes increasingly difficult when Italy falls under the heel of fascism. Fascism brings to the area the desire to make society conform to the Italian model. First, the first names are erased and then the surnames. Slovenian identity is denied, including through the suppression of the Slovenian language. Teaching, the use of the language, and even simply passing down customs and traditions are forbidden. Anyone who opposes, whether they are intellectuals, teachers, or even priests, is beaten, imprisoned, sent into exile, or even killed. It is a very hard time for Gorizia. This period will continue until the war ends. But in 1943, a few days after the armistice, the Cassabili armistice, which we have already talked about in other videos, something happens here near Gorizia. It is the first major battle between the partisans and the German army. From September 11th to 26, 1943, the first partisan groups, which are made up of workers from Monfalcone, the workers from the United Adriatic shipyards, but also intellectuals from the city. In addition, of course, to the groups coming from former Yugoslavia, they face a German army infantry division reinforced with armored units. It is a battle that lasts 2 weeks and in the end sees the Germans prevail, who, clearly relying on armored vehicles, heavy artillery, and the support of the Air Force, managed to gain the upper hand. But it is an early example of the determination, both Italian and Slovenian, to free Europe from the heel of Nazi fascism. When the war ends, and we're in 1945, there's another problem. There's the problem of double identity, because we're on a thin, very thin borderline. A line that, for a long period from the 1500s onward, saw different cultures living together in peace. On a balance, in fact, that was like a tightrope. But when that rope is interrupted, broken, everything becomes much more difficult. From 1945 onward, another story develops, a story that becomes increasingly difficult. This is what Winston Churchill foreshadowed when he defined the famous Iron Curtain that split Europe in two. Well, Gorizia is one of the symbolic cities. Everyone looks toward Berlin because Berlin is a symbol, because Berlin was the capital of the Thousand-Year Reich, because Berlin is under the direct occupation of four powers, and because Berlin is also subject to the blockade. The land blockade was bypassed through a huge airlift. But Gorizia? Gorizia is the same. It's split in two. Gorizia is separated by the wire fence that is no longer there today, but traces of which remain, as we showed you earlier. Gorizia is separated from some hamlets, some municipalities like Vertoiba or St. Peter Prigorici, which are on the other side, and are annexed to the new Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. The Kingdom of Italy, and later the Italian Republic, keeps the historic part of the city, but not this station, which becomes one of the symbols, along with the wire fence of the Cold War. For over half a century, the city is divided. The station Piazza della Transalpina, the Casa Rossa, which you will see later, are some of the main places where the Cold War takes place. And it's a war that isn't fought directly here, but there are key episodes, like in the mid-1950s when the attempt to force the situation through a rally held just a few kilometers from here could lead to the sudden outbreak of the conflict, this time an armed one. These are increasingly tense stalemates, but little by little they lead to the definition of those agreements, the ones that will become known as the Osimo Agreements, which, in addition to crystallizing the eastern border between Italy and Yugoslavia, will also make it possible to find a new way to engage in dialogue towards a world, the socialist world, which is viewed with suspicion, almost as if it were an enemy, but with which the people of Gorizia are beginning to engage in dialogue. They see the possibility of interacting with a new entity called Nova Gorica, which is right behind me. A city that rises where there was nothing, created to have an administrative center where, in fact, there was only a small village. All this translates into new vitality, new opportunities, a new society, a society that is beginning to feel the urgent need to change things, to change them for the better, to recover that sense of Middle Europa, Central Europe, which had been the foundation of Habsburg philosophy for so long and had been successful, because it allowed everyone, regardless of ethnicity or creed, to be part of a great community. Gorica, among other things, until the 1930s was home to a thriving Jewish community, a community that was swept away by the tragedy of the Holocaust, right at the station behind me. During the period of German occupation, from 1943 to 1945, this is the place from which trains departed for Mauthausen, for Theresienstadt, and for Auschwitz. These are trains loaded with Jews, partisans, civilians, former soldiers, people who were considered dangerous by the German occupiers and who had to be exterminated. The station therefore takes on another role, the role of historical memory, preserving what happened so we can understand it and not repeat it. But this station, for over 50 years, was not freely accessible to all the people of Gorizia. There was that barrier that is no longer here in front of us today, as we've seen. They've opened up the square, but I remember it very well. 1/2 meter of concrete, 2 meters of metal railing, barbed wire, and on the facade, a huge red star. symbol of socialism. All of this remained until 1991, which is a date of change, just a short time before. Another wall, the Berlin Wall, had finally been smashed and torn down. It was that wind of change, to quote the Scorpions, that had swept through Europe with a hope called perestroika, called glasnost, a desire to change things, to change them for the better, to make us all feel like citizens of a single continent, each with our own ethnicity, our own customs, our own history, but part of something truly shared. Gorizia, city of the Cold War, as they used to say, a war that was called cold because officially there were no conflicts, but only up to a certain point, as the people of Gorizia realized in the late afternoon of June 28, 1991. It is the first sign of the deep disintegration that will lead to the end of Tito's utopia in Yugoslavia. What had happened? Already in the previous 2 years, Tito had already died. For some time, the very nature of the Yugoslav Federal Union had been reconsidered, to the point that Slovenia, which is right here just a few meters from where I am, had started to think about becoming autonomous. From a federal republic to a republic, plain and simple. Slovenia made this decision already at the end of 1990, setting a date, June 26, 1991, as the day to leave the Yugoslav Federation. The negotiations in reality don't drag on. On the contrary, they move quickly, to the point that the Slovenian parliament already begins to ratify that decisi on June 21 and June 25, so 24 hours ahead of schedule. Slovenia declares its independence, an independence that is not recognized by the government of Belgrade. In fact, a plan of intervention is prepared, sending the Jugoslavska Narodna Armija, the JNA, the Yugoslav Federal Army, to stand guard. The border crossings, those with Hungary, those with Austria, and of course those with Italy, including the Casarosa crossing. And it's not just a symbolic presence, it's not just for show. They even send Soviet-made T-55 tanks. There are as many as 5 tanks positioned here at the Casarosa crossing, not on the Italian side, of course, but on what was then the Yugoslav-Slovenian side, waiting for something. The crews aren't informed. They don't know what they're about to face. They're all young conscripts. Their officers haven't told them what the threat is. They've simply ordered them to be ready because something is going to happen. That something happens in the late afternoon of June 28, 1991. The citizens of Gorizia, as well as the tourists who have gone up to the castle, notice it because they hear bullets whistling and explosions going off. They see columns of smoke rising right here at Casa Casarosa, just beyond the border crossing. What happened? What happened is that the Slovenian territorial militia launched an attack. They attacked exactly those 5 tanks, one of which is in flames. The 3 crew members inside the vehicle are burned alive. Another is killed in the shootout. The shooting is so indiscriminate that some bullets cross the border. They're classic stray bullets and get lodged in the walls of a nearby pizzeria. They even shatter a glass window. For the first time since the end of World War II, the people of Gorizia experience firsthand the true meaning of a conflict. It's an ethnic conflict. It's a civil conflict. It's a conflict that will last only a few days because the government in Belgrade realizes it can't control the Slovenian borders. It can't stop Slovenia from leaving. It can't mobilize the army in its entirety to force a small nation of not even 2 million people to stay within Yugoslavia. It's the first sign of disintegration. Something had already happened in the sports world, because while Slovenia was declaring its independence, a Slovenian athlete, a basketball player, Juristovc, who was with the Yugoslav national team, the last united Yugoslav national team, in Rome for the European Championships, received a phone call. The phone call ordered him not to play in the gold medal game at the European Championship, which was scheduled between Yugoslavia and Italy, the host country that had made it to the final. Stovk spent that evening in civilian clothes, not playing, after painfully informing his teammates, among whom there are great champions, Petrovic, Divac, Kukoc, among others, that he won't be able to play, that he can't play because he received that order directly from Ljubljana. It's the first sign of the breakup, a breakup that was already in the air, but now becomes reality, a breakup that will go through painful days and chapters in the months and years to come. Vukovar, the capital of ruins, Srebrenica, the massacre, Mostar, its beautiful bridge that is destroyed for tactical reasons, Sarajevo and its devastating siege. These are the stages of a martyrdom, the martyrdom of the former Yugoslavia that Gorizia lives through that afternoon, and through which it truly understands what is happening. It's another page of history, a page that intersects with the memory of Gorizia and the eastern border, a chapter of history worth knowing about. We have returned here to the Transalpina station after our brief trip to Piazza della Casa Rosa to conclude our video for today. And we have chosen another symbol, one of the old steam locomotives, the ones that originally ran along the Imperial Royal Railways, the Austrian railways, which marked a point of prosperity and progress at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. The station, as mentioned, had opened to passenger traffic almost 10 years before the start of the Great War, the outbreak of the Great War, which would forever change the face of Europe. But this locomotive that you see, which has been restored, is also the symbol of something else today, of an open Gorizia, inclusive, of a European Gorizia, a Gorizia that has left separations behind forever, starting from 2004, when Slovenia, along with other states, joined the European community, initially as a probationary member, and then from 2007 as a full member. Separations no longer made sense. The barrier was torn down. Piazza della Transalpina became another symbol, a symbol of openness, after more than half a century of closure, separation, and even pain. Today, Piazza della Transalpina, the old station, this locomotive, and much more besides. They present Italy and Slovenia as partners in Europe, as two entities that are in constant dialogue. There was another closure, but it was temporary. It was during the pandemic, that pandemic we may have even forgotten about, that period when we were forced by circumstances, by a health emergency, to stay locked in our homes. During that period, the border had been reinstated. Piazza della Transalpina had been cordoned off, not so much to prevent transit per se, but to prevent contagion. That time now seems forgotten, even though it was only a few years ago. Today we've gone back to looking to the future with hope, and here is Gorizia, this beautiful city, a city with its castle, with its customs, with its traditions, with all its history. Gorizia has finally become something more beautiful, more open, different. Gorizia has become a meeting point, and it's no coincidence that last year, in 2025, the European Union gave Gorizia the role of European Capital of Culture, with a shared project called Go 2025, which for the very first time brought together two neighboring municipalities, Italian Gorizia and Slovenian Nova Gorica, within a single project. A project that made the new generations understand, first of all, but also helped the older generations rediscover those values that seemed forgotten, lost, drowned in mistrust and hatred, the opening of borders. The desire to meet again, to embrace, to get to know each other, to talk to each other, is something beautiful and is part of European culture. Today I invite you again, even though the celebrations for the capital of culture have ended, I invite you again to come to Gorizia, to breathe Gorizia, to see Gorizia, to experience Gorizia firsthand. Because it's a unique, incredible opportunity to understand what it meant to split a city, a community, a society in two, just for political reasons, and what it means to break down barriers and return to living, to breathing. It's what happened in Berlin, and it's what we hope will one day happen elsewhere. Think about Nicosia, the capital of Cyprus, which is still divided today by barriers, barbed wire, minefields, no man's lands, and areas under sniper fire. Here, this is the hope, that one after another, these divided cities, these communities split in two by lines, drawn with rulers on maps, may return to being something unique, whole, and shared, where people can live, talk, eat, drink, joke, and if necessary, even argue, but then make peace together. This is the lesson of Gorizia, and we at Dentro La Storia have been happy to share it with you and invite you to stay with us.